Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So the other day I came across a very interesting video from Feminist, Go Fem Yourself, in which she responds to a talk done by David Shackleton from the Canadian Association for Equality, or CAFE for short. And the way she puts many of the statements through the feminist lens is fascinating. They go in one side saying one thing and then come out the other side saying the complete opposite thing. It really is fascinating to watch. In fact, here's a good example.
Race should not be a source of power or advantage or disadvantage for anyone in a free society.
Race should not be a source of power or advantage. You mean unless you're white, right?
Well, that is a very interesting interpretation. Someone saying that people shouldn't have advantages based on their race clearly means that only white men should have advantage because they're white, right? Because, what other interpretation could there possibly be? Apart from what he actually did say, as opposed to the stuff he didn't say, right? So anyway, this is what I call the feminist lens, and feminists like Go Fem Yourself view the world through this lens, where they start with the result that everything is sexist, everything is racist, and they see the world this way, and then they work backwards to warp and distort the evidence to support it. This is something we see over and over again. In fact, that video she does on David Shackleton is absolutely filled with it. But I'm not actually responding to that video today. That will be a little bit later on in this series. Probably the next video, or maybe the video after that. Because after I viewed that particular video, I went and looked at Go Fem Yourself's channel and found two other videos that I really want to respond to first. And once again, they're really chock full of the feminist lens. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to get through both of them in this particular video. I'm going to give it a try. But the first one's going to take a little bit of debunking to get through, so it's quite possible I'll only have time to go through one. In which case, I'll tackle the second one sometime in the near future. But just before we get to that video, in case you haven't heard of Go Fem Yourself, or maybe the name's a little bit familiar, let me fill you in a little bit on who she is. Maybe about 2 years ago, she was an up-and-coming feminist on YouTube. She got a lot of support from the YouTube feminist community, including a huge push by Kevin Logan. He seemed to be sharing her videos all the time. And then something happened. I'm not exactly sure what, but the train came off the rails and she had a big falling out with certain members of the YouTube feminist community. I'm not exactly sure who, although I suspect that the main one is Christy Winters. Don't quote me on that, but if I had to put money on it, that would be my bet, just based on little bits of circumstantial evidence. And I don't know what the falling out was over. And to be honest, I really don't care. But she had a falling out with them, and she deleted her channel. I know this because I went to look for one of her videos, I think it was about a year ago or something like that, and found that her entire channel had been deleted. But she's back now, and she's been back for a while. Not that anyone's really noticed. She definitely doesn't have the subscribers that she had before. Now, I don't think she identifies as a radical feminist, but she most definitely is moving in that direction. She's basically about one flush away from going down that particular toilet bowl, as we will see in this video. Now, the first video I want to tackle is on an old topic. In fact, a year ago when I started this series, I did, I think, 2 or 3 videos on this particular topic, but I want to look at it again because I find her interpretation absolutely fascinating. Once again, she puts everything through the feminist filter, she rewrites history, reinterprets facts, and things often come out looking exactly the opposite of what they actually are. It is really fascinating to look at. So the topic is, of course, Sargon's tweet to politician Jess Phillips. So without any further delay, let's get stuck into it.
I was catching up on videos, watching Tim's video Decisions plus MythCon 5. And sorry Tim, I'm shamelessly going to use your footage for the purpose of this video. And I realized something when I saw this footage from MythCon 5 between Carl Benjamin and Thomas Smith.
Mythicist Milwaukee was just on, so I'll just add this as a small comment at the end. For those who don't know, Mythicist Milwaukee is kind of this anti-SJW shitlord convention, or at least it turned into that last year when they invited Sargon of Akkad and Thomas Smith to debate social justice.
So this is someone who's a woman, a sexual assault survivor, someone we all know, like she was public about that. It's in the news. And it's in response to a campaign to try to fight online harassment. And you saw fit to tweet at her, to say to her, I wouldn't even rape you.
Yep. And do you understand why your moral outrage about that is something that I just don't care about?
Because you're awful. Yeah, I do.
Now that's it.
You're awful.
Exactly.
That is an unacceptable thing to say to somebody. To tell a rape victim, a sexual assault victim, I wouldn't even rape you is disgusting.
Why?
That's behavior that should be beyond the pale.
Okay, a couple of quick things. You would have heard Thomas Smith say there that Jess Phillips was a rape victim. She's not a rape victim. She's never been raped. She was, however, sexually assaulted about 20 years ago in a pub. Someone groped her, right? Now, obviously, that's wrong. It's not appropriate, but it's not the same fucking thing as rape. The other point is, she hasn't got PTSD over being groped in a pub 20 years ago. At the mere mention of rape, she doesn't curl up into a ball on the ground or burst into tears. In fact, this was her reaction when asked about Sargon's tweet.
Have you contacted the police?
I haven't on this incident. I mean, obviously it all sort of happened yesterday. It was a bank holiday. Whilst these people think that I'm sitting around playing the victim, I was playing games in the garden with my children most of the day. So I don't let it bother me.
Yeah, she didn't let it bother her. Now, I'm no fan of Jess Phillips, but I do have to give credit where credit is due, and Jess Phillips is a strong woman. Now, you might argue that she's incredibly dishonest and incredibly biased and a massive bigot, and, you know, those would be good arguments. I would actually agree with those arguments. But you can't say that she's weak. She's a strong, independent woman who is fully capable of standing up for herself. She's a politician, no less, who routinely goes head-to-head with her opposition. And weak is not a word that I would use to describe her. However, people like Fem Yourself and Thomas Smith are determined to turn her into this weak victim who fell apart at the mere mention of the word rape. This is just not factual in any conceivable way. And it's kind of disgusting considering these people claim that feminism is an empowerment movement. Anyway, let's get back to Fem Yourself, because she's about to rewrite history. Yes, this is quite interesting, folks.
Now, I've seen him say this, I heard him say it. I followed the whole debacle of this when he tweeted this to Jess Phillips, and the aftermath online and in the media. Countless discussions from feminists and others who say it's not right, he shouldn't have said that, and many videos and chats and tweets from Carl and from people who are anti-feminist, people who dislike women in general.
People who dislike women in general. I have no doubt that there are people like that who exist, but I have to wonder what her criteria would be for people who dislike women in general. I reckon that'd be a pretty fucking low bar.
Who were excited and even enthusiastic that a man has said this to a woman, and to a woman who was sexually assaulted.
Whilst these people think that I'm sitting around playing the victim, I was playing games in the garden with my children most of the day. So I don't let it bother me.
Eventually the conversation was led to silly semantics, People analyzed the phrasing, the meaning literally, dissecting every word from every angle, and Carl defended himself, going on even more superficial tangents that pushed this dumpster fire even further in the rabbit hole of Twitter and YouTube. After having seen this talked about for months and months, I realize now all this was a distraction. Take a moment to think about the context. A woman, in this case Jess Phillips, a political figure, was talking about her experience as someone who was sexually assaulted. The goal was to cast light on an issue of massive scale, something taboo that people try to brush under the carpet. She was putting these issues on display for everyone to see, on center stage, a political one at that, and people listened, and people watched as she was talking about sexual abuse, but also inequality and abuse of power.
Yeah, this is absolute fucking bullshit and a rewriting of history. In fact, the clip that Go Fem Yourself played from Sargon and Thomas Smith actually contradicts what she just said there. But anyway, let me give you a short timeline of events so we know exactly what happened, when it happened, leading up to the tweet in question. It all started in Parliament, where Philip Davies wanted to have a talk on International Men's Day about issues like male suicide. And when this was brought up, Jess Phillips laughed at the mere notion of talking about these issues.
Thank you very much. Questions? Jess?
You have to excuse me for laughing, that the idea that men don't have the opportunity to ask questions in this place is a frankly laughable thing. As I say, as the only woman on this committee, it seems like every day to me is.
Well, I wasn't making, with respect, I wasn't making that point. I wasn't making the point that men don't have an opportunity to ask. I was about men's issues. There's a very big difference between men raising issues and the raising of men's issues.
But one could raise men's issues in any single one of the question sessions. So your men's health, absolutely. So prostate cancer, that could be raised in men's questions, couldn't it?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I very much look forward to these arguments being deployed when we come to consider a debate on International Women's Day, because exactly the same arguments could be raised for International Women's Day, that women's health issues, that equality issues could be raised in women and equality questions in other forms. So all I ask is for an equal crack of the whip, that if those issues can be raised without having a debate on International Men's Day, then obviously the same issues can apply for when it comes to International Women's Day. But those arguments have never won the day before this committee.
Now, I'm not surprised someone like Jess Phillips would laugh at the idea of talking about topics such as male suicide, because you have to understand where Jess Phillips has come from. I think she spent close to 2 decades working in a women's refuge. So she would have seen a lot of women come in who were in bad shape, possibly abused by their ex-husband or whatever. If you see that, and only that side of things for 2 decades, it's not surprising that you develop a biased view, a blinkered view. And it's very clear that she is only in Parliament to represent her female voters. And she makes the assumption that the men in Parliament are only there to represent their male voters, even though that's not how Parliament works. In fact, I think there's a pretty good argument that male politicians tend to be more interested in female issues than male issues. But because of Jess's history, it's clear that she doesn't have any empathy for men or men's issues. So when an issue is brought up like male suicide, she tends to laugh it off because only women are the ones allowed to have issues. Only women are the ones that suffer at the hands of men. And men are the powerful ones, right? They're the ones who are in positions of power, like in the government. You know, like Jess herself is, right? Anyway, Jess laughing at the notion of talking about men's issues like suicide caused a little bit of a stir, and by a little bit of a stir I mean a lot of people on the internet were really, really fucking pissed off and hated her. And some of them were abusive to her on social media. Not a surprise. I'm not saying that that was the best course of action, but I'm not shocked that some people would be pissed off and would be abusive towards her. So, Jess, being a politician, spun this. So instead of her being the bad guy who was laughing at male suicide, she suddenly turned it around. So now she was the victim, right? She was the one who was receiving all this abuse. It's very similar to what happened when Cathy Newman interviewed Jordan Peterson, and she clearly lost the debate, and suddenly everyone was talking about how she got thrashed, and to derail that conversation, she started to claim that she was getting all these nasty comments and threats. Someone actually looked into this and found that her supporters were the ones making the majority of the threats to people who weren't her supporters. But, you know, don't let the details get in the way, right? We're trying to craft a narrative here. We're trying to turn people into victims so we can derail the actual conversation. So after this whole event, Jess suddenly became very, very interested in internet censorship.
My name's Jess Phillips and I'm the Member of Parliament for Birmingham Yardley. I'm taking part in Reclaim the Internet because I am sick of young women telling me that they don't want to speak up and give their ideas because they're worried of the backlash that they might get from trolls or bullies. So I think it's time that we did something about it. I myself have had rape threats, have had my children's life threatened, not by anyone who's actually going to do it, but by faceless people on the internet. This is our street now. This is where we are when we're meeting our friends. This is where we do our business online. And we want to make sure that it's as safe for our daughters as it is for our sons, and that we're not missing out on the big ideas of the future because we just don't want to hear women's voices. So that's why I'm taking part, and I look forward to the progress we can make.
Oh, so we have to protect the women online, because it's women who are getting the rape and death threats. Well, I tell you what, I'm really, really glad that this type of stuff would never, ever, ever happen to a male politician, right?
My name's Jess Phillips and I'm the Member of Parliament for Birmingham Yardley. I'm taking part in Reclaim the Internet because I am sick of young women telling me that they don't want to speak up and give their ideas because they're worried of the backlash that they might get from trolls or bullies. So I think it's time that we did something about it. I myself have had rape threats, have had my children's life threatened, not by anyone who's actually going to do it, but by faceless people on the internet. This is our street now. This is where we are when we're meeting our friends. This is where we do our business online. And we want to make sure that it's as safe for our daughters as it is for our sons, and that we're not missing out on the big ideas of the future because we just don't want to hear women's voices. So that's why I'm taking part, and I look forward to the progress we can make.
Ah, yes, Jess, of course, we have to protect the women because you know, men would never be abused online, especially male politicians like Donald Trump. They would just never, ever get abuse, except that they do. If we look at a report that came out a few years ago by the British think tank Demos, we find that male politicians received abuse online 6 times as much as female politicians. But apparently it only counts when female politicians are being abused for some strange reason. Now, this is also backed up by Pew Research, which wasn't looking at politicians, but people in general, and they found that men are more likely to be abused online in 4 out of 6 categories. But women are more likely to take it serious. And if we look at the findings of Pew Research on online stalking, we find that the numbers between men and women are very, very close. As were their findings on people who had something happen to them online which led into physical danger. Once again, the numbers between men and women are extremely close. So to say that this is only a female issue or only something that happens to females or only counts when it happens to females is a fucking lie. It doesn't shock me that Jess would think that it only counts or only happens to women because that's all she's concerned with. Like I said, she has no understanding or no empathy towards men and men's issues. But anyway, it was Jess talking about online censorship that led Sargon to make his famous tweet. It had nothing whatsoever to do with brave Jess talking about female victims of sexual assault and rape and just trying to create a space online for these poor women to come forward and talk about their experiences. No, it had absolutely nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with Jess wanting to censor anyone on the internet who disagreed with her or feminism and using the sexist and biased notion that only women receive online harassment. And the talk between Sargon and Thomas Smith made this very clear. They both mentioned what Sargon was replying to.
If we want to clue into why people don't want you here, let's read your quotes.
Okay.
So you told female MP Jess Phillips.
Yep.
Everyone should know this by now. I just want to make absolutely sure.
Everyone should know. It's in the newspapers, so you probably do know.
Someone who was herself a victim of sexual assault. All because she wanted to start a campaign to rid online bullying, to fight online.
No. When you say, it's a campaign against online bullying, that sounds really neutral. But what it is unjustifiable control over social media.
Let me finish the quote, and then you can. I will, by all means, give you a chance to have your say. So this is someone who's a woman, a sexual assault survivor, someone we all know, like she was public about that. It's in the news, and it's in response to a campaign to try to fight online harassment, and you saw fit to tweet at her, to say to her, I wouldn't even rape you.
Yep. And do you understand why your moral...
And everybody cheering, everybody who is a part of inviting you, you have signaled to the women in the movement, you do not give a shit about using rape as a threat to bully somebody. That's what you have signaled.
It's not a threat. It's the antithesis of a threat. That's the point. And the whole point of it was to demonstrate that I would say, I won't do something, and you will say, that's a threat.
Oh, it's just a coincidence that you said rape.
No, it's a deliberately...
It's a coincidence that you didn't say, I won't murder her, I won't... why don't you name all the crimes?
Do any of these
Go
things.
through all the crimes. Arson, I won't... It's a coincidence.
No, it's entirely deliberate, but the thing is,
because she's a victim of sexual assault.
You don't know anything about the context.
You know that you can use her previous trauma as a cudgel to bully her.
It's nothing to do with her trauma, and you know it, and she knows it, right? She was parading around saying, look, I think I get all these rape threats, and therefore I want to control the internet. And she's an MP, so it's not like she's powerless, right? And I said, right, look, the point I was making is, regardless of what she says, she's going to do it anyway. So if she gets something that isn't a rape threat, you're just going to claim it is anyway, because that's the point. It's all an ideological mission, and I object to it.
So anyway, let's go back to Go Fem Yourself and see her interpretation of these events, because it's an interesting piece of fiction. It really is.
And then a man came along and said something shocking and put the spotlight on himself, put himself at the center stage.
Well, that's a strange interpretation, because just a couple of days later, Jess Phillips went on national television right across the UK, not to mention had numerous articles written about her, all which promoted her notion of online censorship. Now, Sargon didn't get any of that. He didn't get the support or the reach of the mainstream media supporting him.
It's a strange gosh knows where they've got it from.
Pushed Phillips out, and ultimately what he did was derail the conversation.
Ah, yes, that is the clearest example of derailing the conversation I have ever seen in my life. He clearly changed the conversation about internet censorship, and by derailing it, he actually made the conversation about internet censorship. Oh, hold on, that's the same thing, isn't it? Oh, I guess he didn't derail the conversation at all, did he?
Suddenly what everyone was talking about was, how can a man say this to a woman?
And we want to make sure that it's as safe for our daughters as it is for our sons.
How can a man say this to a victim of sexual abuse?
Whilst these people think that I'm sitting around playing the victim, I was playing games in the garden with my children most of the day. So I don't let it bother me.
From that point on, that is all that was talked about. All we heard from that point on was the voice of a man saying this shocking thing over and over and over again.
The number of tweets and then the retweets and those people piling in, dogpiling as you call it, mean there have been something like 5,000 tweets, pretty much referring to raping you or not raping you.
Suddenly everyone forgot about the woman who was talking, what she was saying, why she was saying it, and who she was talking to.
It's a strange, gosh knows where they've got it from, but yeah, it's about 5,000 people, 5,000 notifications or mentions that I've got.
Yeah, and the ones that are saying, I wouldn't rape you, and the others that are saying, this is not an insult, that they're saying they wouldn't rape you. It's as though you should be grateful somehow for that.
What Carl did was kick Jess Phillips off the stage and silence the voice talking about inequality, bias, abuse of power. But that, no one seems to be talking about that.
Yeah, but Jess wasn't talking about those things before Sargon supposedly kicked her off the stage. Yeah, she was talking about censorship and internet harassment beforehand, and she continued to talk about censorship and internet harassment afterwards. No one silenced her, no one derailed the conversation, no one changed the topic, no one took her voice away. In fact, the media amplified her voice. Many times louder than Sargon's. So the fact that you're turning Jess Phillips into this helpless, voiceless victim with no autonomy and no power is fucking laughable. Jess Phillips is the establishment. She's part of the government. She's part of the group of people who make policy and laws and govern our society. Well, the society in the UK, that is. She's not some helpless, unknown person. Sargon, however, has a lot of influence in one small corner of the internet, and I'm not having a go at Sargon by any means, but he's not part of the government. And if you asked 100 people on the street if they've ever heard of Sargon, I'm guessing the vast majority of them, maybe even all of them, would say who. So it's fascinating that she's somehow portraying Sargon as this all-powerful dictator who has snatched away the voice of this poor, defenseless, helpless woman. And the opposite is true. In fact, the whole reason Sargon made that tweet in the first case was because he was scared of people like Jess, and Jess in particular, taking away his fucking voice. You've got everything back to front, for fuck's sake.
It's like no one saw that. Like no one stopped to ask, why did he do that? What happened really when he did that? All everyone is talking about is that phrase he said, like literally. If it's right or not to tell someone you wouldn't even rape them. Everyone agrees it is disrespectful, but still people keep arguing about whether it's okay or not to say it.
Yeah, and that was the conversation before Sargon said it. Jess herself was talking about people saying disrespectful things to women online. That was her whole argument. Nothing changed. That conversation continued. Nothing was derailed. No one was silenced, for fuck's sake.
It is so superficial when you think about it. And it is a no-end argument. It's circle jerk. The people who were horrified and the people who were enthusiastic by that felt that way for the same reason, because it was awful and outrageous. At the beginning, there was center stage talk about important social issues, and with one sentence, it was derailed into mini semantic arguments and infighting. Cal put out a bait and everyone took it. And I include myself in that. I've made videos about this, many tweets, I've had many discussions, lost a lot of my time debating this with various people online. I even made a satire Valentine card to mock him. Looking back on that, I regret it because I took the bait. Talking about this in this way, what we're doing is still talking about Cal here, still putting Cal on that center stage, in the spotlight. Where is Jess Phillips' voice?
That's a good question. Where is Jess Phillips' voice? Let's see. It's all across the media. She's appearing on TV shows and in newspapers and in YouTube videos. Getting the full support and amplified as much as possible by the mainstream media, who fully support her and at no point question anything she says in any fucking critical way. And it's also in Parliament, where policies are made. That's where her voice is. Poor, defenceless, silent Jess, who has no voice, except for all those things that I just mentioned, which happens to be a much bigger voice than Sargon or anyone else who will ever watch this video. But that would be dealing with reality, wouldn't it? If I were to bring up all those things, and we know that the feminist lens really doesn't deal too well with reality. Next.
Looking back now, that's what I should have posted about and made material about. What Kyle did. This is a form of deplatforming in a way.
Yes, deplatforming is now defined as giving someone a much louder voice and having them appear throughout the mainstream media with the full support of mainstream media, not to mention also having a voice in Parliament. That is the new definition of being silenced and deplatformed, according to feminists, apparently. Oh, fuck, I need a drink.
He said something he knew would shock. Everyone's eyes and ears followed, while he never actually engaged in dialogue, never responded to what she was saying.
Never responded to what she was saying. So she was saying she was getting rape threats on the internet, and Sargon responded by giving her a non-rape threat to prove that she would still interpret it as a rape threat, which she did, but somehow that's not responding to what she was saying. Apparently that's responding to something else, or some. I don't know. I'm confused at this point. This feminist lens stuff, it gives me a headache after a while because it's so out of focus. It's like wearing someone else's glasses or something.
He hijacked that platform and voided it. What do people mostly remember about that day when Jess Phillips spoke out about sexual assault?
That day when Jess Phillips spoke out about sexual assault. Now, this is a very, very important phrase. You'll see why in a minute, because, yeah, she is majorly fucked up here, as you'll see. Just keep that phrase in mind. That day when Jess Phillips spoke out about sexual assault.
People remember one sentence said by a man who wasn't even there. So what was Jess Phillips saying? What was that speech about? Who was it addressed to? Labour Party Jess Phillips and Mary Craig, and Conservative Party Theresa Villiers and Anne Jenkin. First of all, regardless of political parties and ideologies, you have women coming together to speak out about something. In solidarity. This meant something. They talked about various sexual assaults that they suffered at the hands of men who were often in a position of authority and privilege. They talk about how they felt, how this altered their lives, and in various accounts, either their fear of reporting, not being believed, not knowing if the person was caught once a report had been made. These are all things that victims of sexual assault think about, and this influences their coming forward or not.
Okay, it's at this point in the video I have to stop for a moment and scratch my head and reassess everything, because, you know, I want to be as accurate as possible. And her claim at this moment is so fucking ludicrous and so wrong that I have to consider the fact that maybe I've misunderstood what she said. I mean, I'm not perfect after all, right? Maybe I've misunderstood. Maybe she's just explained herself poorly. I don't know. But if I have understood her correctly, it's a huge mistake. Let me explain. So, if I understand correctly, and I'm pretty sure I'm right here, she's saying that Sargon's tweet that I wouldn't even rape you was in response to Jess Phillips and the other 3 female politicians talking about their experiences with sexual assault and rape, and it was designed by Sargon to snatch away the attention of that important speech and instead focus on the outrage generated by the hate-filled, monstrous comment made by this evil man. Or I think that's what she's saying. I'm confident that's what she's saying. The problem with that, the massive problem with that, is the timeline. Now, Sargon's tweet was in May 2016, and the 4 female politicians had their speech about sexual assault in October 2017. So, well over a year later. How could Sargon's tweet be designed to derail a conversation that wouldn't take place for over a year? Has Sargon got a time machine? Can Sargon somehow see into the future? I'm curious. I'd like to know the answer. If Sargon can see into the future, I just have to say, Sargon, if you're watching, mate, I've always been a good friend, a good supporter of you and your channel. If you could send me a private message with the lotto numbers, I'd really appreciate it. And I don't mind if I have to wait for over a year. I mean, if you can only see a year in the future, that's fine. You know, I'll wait that year to get those lotto numbers. But, you know, if you can give them to me for next week, that would be even better, mate. You know, remember your friends, Sargon. That's all I've got to say, right? I mean, what an evil genius. What an evil genius Sargon is. Derailing a conversation that wouldn't happen for over a year. I mean, Sargon should be the next Bond villain, I think. But only if there's a female Bond, right? And she can talk about the patriarchy, and Sargon can be dressed in a white suit or something, and we'll call him Dr. Patriarchy. Oh, but hold on, that might all be a plot to derail the conversation about sexual assault sometime in the future, or something.
Ultimately, the goal of this speech was to reach out to other victims of sexual assault and encourage them to reach out and talk, to not be afraid. These were public accounts given in the wake of the #MeToo movement.
Yes, the Me Too movement that started a year after Sargon's tweet. Well, over a year after Sargon's tweet. So this would seem to be just a massive fuck-up on her behalf. Unless, of course, she means that anything Jess Phillips does or says from now on is overshadowed by this one incident, which I think is absolute bullshit if that's her argument. But if that were her argument, then that's not Sargon's fault. That's the fault of feminists and social justice advocates who continuously bring this up. I mean, the footage of Thomas Smith talking to Sargon on stage, we saw Sargon numerous times say, "Can we talk about the issues?" And Thomas Smith was just interested in talking about that one particular quote. So, yeah, not Sargon's fault. You really should point the finger at your own side if that's your argument. But I don't think it is. I think you're just shit at research, which, isn't surprising, because the feminist lens really isn't about being factual. It's about a reinterpretation of reality, isn't it?
These were women who were saying something happened and it's not right and something has to change. These are certainly things that many people, and I'm sorry not sorry to say, many men want to silence women about.
Okay, generally speaking, critics of the Me Too movement do not want to silence women who are talking about sexual assault or rape. The issue is when they name someone publicly and that person is put on trial through social media, and it skips the entire court system with due process and having a lawyer and being able to face your accuser and everything that goes along with that, which is, basic legal rights. And because it skips all that, and because it's trial by social media, it can be used to destroy someone's career or their reputation when that person is potentially totally innocent. That's the issue. It's not that we hate women and, don't believe that rape ever happens and all this other bullshit that people like yourself tend to go on about. It's about basic legal rights, which everyone should have.
Because isolated, silent, and fearful people are easier to control, abuse, and use. There is still a shitload of men who want to silence women. All the backlash the Me Too movement proves it, and how and why this conversation was derailed proves it also.
Yeah, I don't think you're using the same definition of proof that I myself and other people tend to use. I think your definition of proven may be a little bit more flexible, let's say.
Men like Carl, who do things like this, do it to scare sexual assault victims from coming forward.
Whilst these people think that I'm sitting around playing the victim, I was playing games in the garden with my children most of the day. So I don't let it bother me.
They like to target women especially because they don't like women who defend themselves and voice their opinions. What they're really saying is, if you come forward, we will humiliate you and denigrate you. We will silence you. We will make your life a nightmare.
Whilst these people think that I'm sitting around playing the victim, I was playing games in the garden with my children most of the day. So I don't let it bother me.
These people are bullies. They are pathetic, and the only way they find to make themselves feel important is by doing shit like this. We have to take the conversation back to what was said in the beginning. In this case, to the victims of sexual assault, please consider coming forward. It's up to us to put the spotlight back on the people who have something truly meaningful to say. We cannot let others derail the conversation, the progress, and the movement. We cannot let people who abuse of their power silence others.
Abuse of their power, silencing others. This is just fascinating. She actually thinks that Sargon has more power than Jess Phillips. Jess Phillips, a sitting member of Parliament, who, as I've been saying throughout the video, gets constant support by the media. Non-critical support, right? They never criticise her, they just amplify her voice. But somehow Sargon is the one with power, and he's silencing Jess Phillips, even though she was the one that was talking about internet censorship, which was what Sargon was responding to. It's just fascinating to listen to Go Fem Yourself, because she interprets this as the exact opposite of what reality actually is.
We have to be more careful and not take that bait. We have to take the spotlight back, and we have to fill that void back with voices and words that matter.
So, I hope you've enjoyed this journey looking through the feminist lens at the distorted reality on the other side. Now, I did say I was going to attempt to do a second video from Go Fem Yourself in this video, but unfortunately I've run out of time, so I'll save that one for another time. That other video is about the Proud Boys. And of course, I've also got the cafe one to respond to as well. So you can expect to see more of Go Fem Yourself in the near future.
There have been something like 5,000 tweets, pretty much referring to raping you or not raping you.
Yeah, I mean, their level of discourse is that they're saying that they don't want to rape me, as if raping is something to do that they do to someone they like.